Um, I would like to start with a correction or an apology. That information that went out said that I was doing the presentation, but I'm introducing what I think is an amazing group of people. I know very little about birds, but I've learned an awful lot over the last 3 years. And that's a testament to the group of people that we do this with. It varies between 15 and 20, is just a stunning group of people that are so helpful, so knowledgeable. We've got great scientists, we've got great photographers, we've got a whole range of things that just make it a very special morning, and we look forward to it every month. It's always exciting and always welcoming and enjoyable. We've been going for 3 years now, and doing surveys on the river. We do 2 surveys that we'll show you what they are, and we're going to do a brief presentation looking at what we've collected, some interpretations of that data, the areas of the Cooks River that we survey, and how that fits into other groups that are surveying, because there's quite a few groups. So almost the whole river's covered by the groups on the that are doing surveys now. And we'll go into why those surveys are important as well. Jennifer will give you an overview of these groups and compare the various habitats the groups survey and how that determines the birds that we see there, which are quite varied. It's quite interesting. Even the 2 routes that we do, it's quite varied what we do see. Doug Benson will then present and interpret the data that we've collected over 3 years, and that does go off to various places. It goes off to Birds Australia and some other places, so people will fill us in during the night. And Doug's been collecting and interpreting that data over 3 years, and some interesting things that are coming out, what we see, when and why we might see them. And this is a forum as well, so if people have other ideas that vary from ours, please feel free to speak up. Following Doug will be David, with a collection of his stunning photographs, and I think we all know the quality of David's photographs, and we'll see a lot of them tonight, and they are really breathtaking. We'll start off now with what bird is this, because what I learned from this group is that people talk about bird watchers, but I've found out that the most important thing are bird hearers. And people in the group are phenomenal. They say there's a crested pigeon over there, and then everyone turns their binoculars and finds it. People hear it, and we actually record data on birds that are identified just by hearing. Some of them are very hard to find, but what we'll do now is just a little sample of that, and we'll ask you to listen and see if you can hear it, and maybe just it'll identify the bird afterwards, but we'll hear the sound and then see if you can identify what it is. Ready to go with that, Jen?
Oh, yes. Yes. Oh, yes.
So, yeah. Already started a few sounds, I think, the first one. Sorry. Call out if you think you know what it is.
Come on, you said it soon. Oriole. Yeah, olfactorial.
Correct. Olfactorial. Female there. Actually looks a little bit like a fig bird with that red eye. Beautiful sound. You hear it a lot of places along the river.
Yes.
Really melodic. Okay, next one coming up. Willie Wagtail. Yeah. We saw a close relative last week, the grey fantail. Yeah. This is one of its sweet calls. It's also got a very aggressive call when it's defending its nest or people invading. Okay, next one. Oh, that was, yes. Willie. You there? Yep. A couple of other birds in there. What that was. That was the tide changing, I think. Yeah. They've got such a varied call too. And I think territorial call, so they vary from bird to bird. A favourite? Oh no. Oh yeah. He just dropped out of the tree. Female, that's the female.
Yeah.
Sitting on a frangipani. Yeah. Okay. So that was just a little introduction of often the sounds are really important. Okay, we might kick off with a.
Someone wants to come in and so the next one. Your pin one.
Yep. Okay, so as you can see, this is a mudlark. The group formed mainly from Jenny's initiative. She was participating with other groups and contacted me one day and said, why don't we form our own group? And we had some negotiations with the councils and decided, bugger it, we'll just go ourselves. So they wanted all sorts of conditions put on us. But, and the name Mudlarks came from another variation of the mud crabs. We've got the mudlarks, the crab walkers, etc. So that's a mudlark. And next one, can I just push it to, what do I push, the arrow?
Yeah. No.
No? You might have to stand there, Jim.
What am I doing? Scrolling down?
Oh, scroll down, right, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, this is a flock of mudlarks. On a typical morning, as you can see, Jamie's spotted something. Some people are very interested, others are wandering with their arms folded, and there's me in the background trying to find, where's that bird on this sheet? I can't never find.
The guy that with his arms folded is our expert. Our numbers always spike when he comes to save it. He's one that can recognise birds flying over.
Yeah, and he's hearing impaired and wears a hearing aid, but he can hear birds that none of us.
And we think it's a kind of arrangement between the birds and his hearing aid. It turns it up so we can hear them.
Okay, I'll push through to the next one. No, sorry, Jen. It is just the maps of the routes that we run. We do two routes. 1 month we do what we call the Boat Harbour. So we go along past Ewan Park, down around Boat Harbour, over to Cutting Creek and back along the river. And the second week we do the Wave Rock site. So we go across Beeman Park, through Marrickville Golf Course, into Dibble Waterhole, and back around the golf course. Golf courses are quite barren places, and this will come out later in the talk from the other people. There's quite a dramatic lack of understory in the places we survey, except for Ford Avenue. And it's obvious, it'll show up in the data that what we're seeing in places like that, it's quite, I mean, we're seeing a lot of birds, we're seeing a huge number and a big variety, but we don't see a lot of the little birds that need that cover and protection in the sites that we do. They do the other sites, if we just go on to the next slide now. So there's some of the other groups. Sorry, Jennifer.
Oh, what have I done?
That's all right. That's the two routes for the mudlarks, and the next one just shows. Or was it the previous one? Just shows the other groups. Yeah. You can see they're not very well shown, but there's the Tempe bird group, the Wallow Creek bird group. There's a group up at Rosedale, and Alison's here from that group. And what have I left out? The Greenway group. So there's I think we're starting to get a good coverage of that area and all that data is being fed into information, things like eBird and other sources. So That's an important part. And we are, believe it or not, even though we do a lot of talking and chatting, and Jen's always trying to keep us quiet and keep us hurrying along, we try to be scientific. We start at the same time. We note the tide, we note the weather, we note the rainfall, we note the season, and we see a lot of variation on that. And we try to do the things exactly the same time each month. So we always start around about the same time, if we can.
I've photocopied or copied our survey sheets there, and you can have a look at the range of birds that we survey, and also looking at our headings, which also include breeding behaviour, because we're trying to kind of get more connections about times of the year and when breeding occurs.
We all have our favourite birds as well, and there's always a few things that always excite us. The tawnies are always exciting because they're so hard to see and they move around a bit, but suddenly they'll be spotted, and you can always, it's like the adoration of the magi. Everyone's looking like so in a praying position. So it's there's a few that are very excited. The spoonbills are rare, and the eastern rosellas. There's a few birds that really excite everyone. Okay, I'm just finishing off now with if we can roll through to the next one.
Yeah.
Which will just be some of David's. This is an example of, it's just a number of birds, and looking at the different sites, the fact that, as you can see, the Australasian wood duck, Wave Rock, we're seeing a fair few of them, Boat Harbour, fewer, Rosedale aren't recording any, and these aren't exactly accurate. I've just taken these out of the...
Is that per annum? Because I can't imagine we see...
No, it's not per annum. It's over probably a couple of surveys, but just to give a broad idea that there are birds that are seen at some spots but not others.
Because the tawny frogmouth, I can't imagine 15.
Yeah. So the egrets only at Rosedale, the great egrets, the eastern rosella, they're seen at one place and not another. And part of the things that we discuss after we see these things is why that might be the case. You can see... Yeah, Nankin, we've seen one. Yeah.
We've seen it about 3 times during the time that we surveyed.
Yeah, so that's just a sample. Some of David's, this was actually swallows feeding on air while flying. I think that there's another photo in yours, David, I'm sure, that's got the bird actually putting something into the mouth of the younger bird, I think. But yeah, just phenomenal photograph, that one. And there she is, the wise old one. I don't know.
I mean, that one's no longer there.
David might know where. Yeah, they do move around. They're often in one spot for a long time, then they move off somewhere else.
This is
the mangrove
of the striated heron that posed for us. It was so still for about 3 minutes. Everyone was able to get around and get it, and it was so focused on its food.
Okay, next one. And of course our favourite, very feisty little fella, defending its territory there. But we don't see a lot of these, but mainly Ford Avenue we see them, but they're always treasured sighting. Okay, and the spoonbill, always good to see. Much loved ahead of its cousin, the bin chicken.
The sacred ibis.
The sacred ibis. Okay, that's there we are again. Yep. On the Wave Rock route. So thanks for that. I'll pass over to Jen now, and she'll do a bit more broader analysis of the different sites.
So now, let me stop doing that. Those photos. I'm sorry, I'm not very elegant at this tonight. But...
welcome everyone. Are we going to be started or?
Yep. Yeah, you can, I'm just going to share the screen.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that everyone can see it. Here we go.
Because I'm looking at.
Yep.
We combined both maps because now these bird watching groups have been around for some time. and some of the bush care sites have been consolidated, and about 5 people from the Greenway Birdos are regularly members of the Mudlarks, and we go along to the Greenway events, but there, you know, often people from, I know some people from Rosedale come and join us, as well as some people that attend the Tempe. And I don't know if there's anyone from Woolway Creek that comes to the Mudlarks. Okay, Valerie does, so that's great. Now, you can see it's a kind of vast area. I'm not being seen, am I? Vast area, but with a range of habitat. Now, along the Cooks River, because I wasn't sure of Rosedale, I actually walked it yesterday, and it's very similar to parts along the Cooks River, but where we survey, but it's a lot shorter. You've got the adjacent park to the bush care. It's very thick. It's wider than a lot of our bush care along further east, but it's quite short. And you could see across to the other side, and you would see birds on the river. And I was very impressed. You get quite a number of small birds that we don't get. You get the red-brow finch, and you get a lot of other small birds. You get the...
One golden whistler.
Oh yes, that's wonderful. But I mean, you get them consistently, and that's why we don't get them further.
Why we started our run was to see how plantings were affecting the bird life. That's why we've limited ourselves to the bush care site, river and mangroves and adjacent parks and playing fields. That's our 3 zones.
Yeah.
And we note down what they're feeding on because it affects our plant.
What other small birds do you get there?
Probably, we don't think we get that many. I mean, it's sort of frustrating for us. We've been trying to get resident blue wrens again. Sadly, I think a lot of us know when we take out the lantana, the blue wrens go away.
That's true. Blue wren yesterday.
But yeah.
Oh, that's great.
They are there.
Yes.
And the red brows come through. They're not resident, but they come through.
I think you get
the New Holland.
the New Holland honey eaters
White plumed honey.
and the white plumed honey
But it
eaters.
depends very much on the season. If the wattles are in flower, we get lots.
Yeah.
It's the same everywhere. Birds come for seasonal food. So.
Anyway, so that's interesting. According to the seasonal and what's happening in your bush care site and around the park area, you get a range of birds. Now, moving along here, I better keep on going to where we do the boat harbour circuit. I'm going to mention Cup and Saucer Creek because I think it's been a very successful establishment in terms, it's now mature. And we're so pleased we can get a couple of hatchings per year, especially for the purple swamp hen. We don't see the purple swamp hen further up, straight closer towards Marrickville. It tends to be concentrated around Cup and Saucer Creek and the other side, close to the actual boat harbour. And we get moorhens there and ducks. And of course the ibis. When I first went round there, I thought we're going to be just the ibis. It's going to be a sanctuary for the ibis and we're not going to see anything else. But I'm very pleased. I'm not very good at distinguishing ducks, but we do get a range of ducks. Unfortunately, at the moment, we do have a kind of filmy of that green algae or whatever it is down the first room. They're like rooms in that area. But if you go to walk around towards the back, you can have a good view. And you've got to be careful too, that you walk down the sides because the purple swamp hen chicks are they're like fluff balls on stick legs, you know, they're beautiful little things. Anyway, moving on, Boat Harbour and around, we're getting to see more birds, and then we come to what I call the sulphur-crested cockatoo and rainbow lorikeet accommodation. We've got that tree with a double hollow, and we've got especially 5-star accommodation provided by engraved wooden nesting box attached to it. Now in the spring, that's wonderful because there's often a contest about who's going to get the bigger hollow, and it's quite interesting there. And then we come round to Ford Avenue, and I think that's been a great success story. It's thick and it's dense. It's not, you know, often we've done bush care sites and they're narrow and birds don't get that depth of security. And we always see now a superb fairy wren. We've seen a golden whistler, we've seen a white plumed honeyeater, and we tend to see more when David Hare's there. Because, and we have to split because some of us go up high over and some of us go underneath. And it really, if you go early in the morning, it's really a great treat. And often you can hear we often hear red wattlebirds there as well. Okay, now moving, no, I haven't done the others, but I won't go, most of you know about the wave rock sites. It's more open, but, and Doug and I were talking about it today, if you plant certain trees like the swamp mahogany, it'll attract the parrots. And I remember a couple of surveys we did of around to Wave Rock. One bird had 4 different species in it. And that was fantastic. One tree had 4 different birds. Rainbow lorikeets, what's the other form? Musk lorikeets, a corella, and an eastern roselle, all in the one tree. So isn't that, it was near the bend where you before you approach going over the river, over the bridge over the river. Now, we do have the Wave Rock site, which is really growing and developing, and we are seeing more birds there, and we're seeing more birds nesting along there. Simon, you've found out some bird nests along there in the mangroves, and all along the Cooks River we find birds nesting in the mangroves. And we've got the mudlarks, who do a beautifully constructed circular, semi-spherical nest, and you've got and the woolly wagtails do a tiny beautiful one there. So we're coming there. Now, I do not know very much about Wooleye Creek. I know that you get a better range of birds. I'm open to people that it's been going for some time, that bird watching group.
Okay, I'll just say, yeah, it has, and they have a number of different survey routes as they contribute to similar sites. Yeah, the survey groups are generally smaller, I think.
Do you see, what kind of birds do you see? Do you see smaller birds or mix?
Well, even in our the small one I do, which is a creek, a golf course, and trees along a stream, we get quite a variety, but we've seen less and less of the small birds.
Yes.
From wrens and stuff. Lots of ducks. Quite a variety of, we would get about 25 species.
That's not bad. Yeah. And then we come to the Tempe, and the 2 areas that are surveyed in Tempe, according to Chris. Is it as big? Is the area as big as we would do along the Cooks?
Yeah, but they do, they split into 2 groups. So one group, they're not going to be surveyed. So one group goes up and around the ponds.
Yeah.
Not quite mature understory, so we pick up a lot of those. The other group will stop around the salt marsh and along the edge of the river, getting towards the big bridge there. So they get all sorts of weird stuff, whales and things like that.
Yeah, Chris Mabry was saying that you get more deeper diving birds there. That is more prevalence of those rather than the normal ducks that we tend to get on, you know, Cup and Sauce and around on the.
There's a lot of boats there, so more would say.
Oh, okay.
John and I also bird watch at Landing Lights, and that has an amazing.
I know. David's on his.
I mean, you get golden testiculars and all these things
Yeah.
that are common there that aren't anywhere else on the river that I know.
Yeah, David on his Facebook page often has beautiful photos from Landing Lights.
Yeah.
Can we go on to the next one, please? The reason I put this in is there is a real worry about the lack of small birds. Small birds play a vital role in the ecosystem. The tiny insects that feed on plants and trees, and without them, the kind of ecosystem suffers. And the reason I'm putting this is part of the Greenway it's a hot spot for small birds. And this is the backyard in Western Street, which backs on to a enclosed bush care site. So it's quite a large backyard, and there's been a concerted effort within the council and with the Greenway Birdos to encourage people to plant small bird attracting trees. But this is a particularly good example of that. That backs right on to the light rail and to the Fred Street bush care site. Could I have the next one? And you can see this is Fred Street, and this is part of their green trellis program, where you've got good backyards, you've got greening of the streetscape. And the next one, please. And this is actual the Fred Street, which is an enclosed bush care site that goes down to a narrow, it's like a battle axe block. And if you travel on Old Canterbury Road and you see the Lewisham West Tower is there, and you see a sign that says Lewisham, that's just below that. You walk down the stairs and it's enclosed. You've got to get keys to get into it. And so it's fairly protected. And there's a range, there's now a multi-level bush there, and it's getting quite thick. Now, we don't always see birds there, but we have seen a golden whistler. We have seen at one time 30 silver eyes. We do see New Hollands there. And along, it's really interesting. Of all the, could I have the next one? This is another view, and you can see a bit of the pipe there. And you can see it's quite thick. There's a lot of, some might call it weed, but that is protective of the small birds. And I did this because this is the light rail, and there's bush either side of it. And it's funny, when we walk into that Fred Street side, we often see the superb fairy wrens hopping down along the electricity lines along the light rail. Okay. And this is another example of their greening. There's been a concerted effort to attract small birds. And this is what we might have to do, because they are now not getting less common. We used to see fairly frequently pardalotes, spotted pardalotes. They're not as common along there as they used to be, but we regularly see New Holland honeyeaters. I would say every survey we would see New Holland honeyeaters. Now, this is the southern part of the Greenway that goes from Waratah Mills to Lewisham. There is another part that goes along Hawthorn Canal, goes around, so you've got the open parkland, you've got the canal, and you've got some bush care sites along there. Now they get birds similar to what's on the Cooks River, and they're now getting smaller birds along the, in Richard Murden Reserve, there is a bush care site right near Marion Street, and they're getting a few small birds there. Have I missed anything about that, David? Because David goes along to all these to these birding groups. Now, after all our industry, observing, recording and everything, we all like to have a cup of tea and we do a lot of discussion. And that's really good because we exchange information. David is very interested in peregrine falcons, and when they're nesting, he tells us about them, and he's encouraged other people to go along with him to see them. Other people discuss different birds, and we really try and get, we really try to be accurate in our labelling of birds. And I remember one time we're sitting there, and Chris Mabry had to go sooner. He couldn't stay long, but he came barrelling back on his bike saying, "No, wrong egret. That was a cattle egret." And he's done that. He was the one that stayed back and made sure that he got the grey fantail. We had mislabelled it as a willy wagtail. So it's one way of kind of sharing conversation, and I can't fault this group. Everyone contributes. I've been in birding groups overseas where there's very competitive spirit. Oh, how many did you get? I got more than you. And there's nothing like that. And I've got to tell you one more funny thing is David Hare, he's very understated. He's trying to encourage us to learn. So he's telling how to distinguish one male mudlark from the female. So we're looking, you know, it's quite mottled with black and white. And apparently it's about an eyebrow,
Yes.
one and another. We're trying to all kind of focus on that, you know, and it was really good fun. One thing we're very lucky about, these birds are tame. When you go overseas where there's less contact, less boats, less whatever going around, they fly away. These birds are now, especially on the Cooks, they more virtually pose for us, you know, some of them, you know, they stay around so that we can really see what they're doing. And we're learning more. We're seeing how they eat, they're seeing how they, you know, where they breed and everything like that. So it's very worthwhile. Okay.
Because in the city they're louder.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yep. And you happy to?
Okay.
Hang
Can I
on.
move this? Oh, okay, can we get rid of that?
Yeah.
Rid of
Not
that.
sure what Acrobat's got a problem with. Yep. Oh,
Okay. This is the intellectual part. Lots of graphs and so on. I'm a scientist, and I got involved at the beginning of this project because I'm essentially a botanist. So I'm not a bird person, but I can identify some of them. But I was interested to find out whether recording data or data recorded by a group of people, I won't use the word citizen scientists, but that sort of thing, whether we could actually get something worthwhile out of the results. So my contribution, I suppose, to the setup originally was to ensure that it was done methodically. The secret to science is not brilliance, it's really being methodical, doing the same thing all the time and recording and so on. So in this case, the group arranged to meet at the same time, 7 to 9, on the second Tuesday of the month, and do it right through. We've done it right through the lockdown.
Yeah.
We had we missed a few times, but
this time, the most recently we
did some individual contributions. So I've put together some graphs here for the figures just to show you some of the patterns of the different bird species. So okay, the top graph there is the rainfall. Oh, we essentially we've done it 3 years, beginning in 2019 February, I think it was, right to that's 3 years to now. If you look at this top graph, you'll see and take your mind back to the climatic periods we've been through. You'll see that 2 major peaks in the rainfall. The first one in February 2020 and the second one in March 2021. So first of all, okay, this is good. This is going to have some effect on the birds. The first peak came after this period here. You can see we've got this is actually the bushfires, if you remember that. This is December, January, the bushfires. So this period here is essentially drought. So we've got a nice year of drought. We've got a big rainfall event, reasonably good rainfall through, another big rainfall event a year later, and good rainfall since then. If we go to the bottom graph, you will see the total number of birds we recorded on each occasion. The two different colours there are the ones to Boat Harbour route, and the next one, the orange one, will be the Wave Rock route. So you can see we record around about 300 birds total in the 2-hour period, getting up here to 400. But actually, sorry, I made a mistake on that. The blue is the native birds. The red is the exotic birds, the introduced species. And really this figure is to show you that the exotic birds, and they are Indian miners, starlings and doves, are a very minor component of the bird fauna. So essentially we're dealing with a whole lot of native birds. It's not like if you go to plants and bush and weeds, the weeds in bushland, urban bushland predominate. But here, the native birds predominate. The exotic birds are pretty well unimportant. How do we go? What do I do?
Just use that little wheel and you can.
Okay, that's right.
Yep.
Okay, here the numbers of birds, as I said, up to 400 birds made. Overall, we've seen something like 60 species. Well, so that'll be 60 native species and 3 exotics at the 2 sites, made up of about a third are water birds, about a third are woodland birds, and these were the ones that Jennifer was referring to when she talked about the small birds and needing cover and so on. I put them in a woodland birds group. And open area birds, these are the ones of the grasslands and so on, the seagulls and the ravens and so on. Down here, we've got numbers of species for the open area birds and the woodland birds in red. And I was trying to see if you have a pattern. Initially, we thought, okay, there should be more species in spring, and then it'll drop off in winter. And so, yes, there are sort of, for the woodland birds particularly, there are 3 peaks there for the 3 springs. Okay, that's putting all the data together. If you then take out the data of individual birds, you come up with much nicer stories. So here we've got the rainbow lorikeets. And so this is the number of rainbow lorikeets. This is the 2 sites here in the different colours. And you can see here, Jennifer referred to us seeing a lot of rainbow lorikeets on the swamp mahoganies. And that was in May, June 21. You see the peak there? Now, we know that they were feeding on the swamp mahoganies because my botanical expertise told me that it was the swamp mahogany, and so we know that fits nicely. So if we come back, you'll know that there's the rainfall's down the bottom there. Sorry, it's a bit blurred, but you'll see that there's a peak in rainfall here and a peak in rainfall here. So if this flowering of the swamp mahoganies was caused by the peak in rainfall here, why didn't we have a peak of birds here and a peak of birds back here? And the answer to that is that the swamp mahoganies flower well in good conditions. So back here in the drought, remember this first year is the drought period, so there's probably no flowering. So we've just got low numbers of rainbow lorikeets. We then have our first peak of rainfall here. And what happens is that the rainfall with eucalypts encourages the tree to flower, but it takes 12 months for that, from the initiation of the buds through to the final flowering. So the rainfall here initiates the buds, which then grow through, and so you get the nice massive flowering here. So the whole story makes sense. At the same time as seeing all these rainbow lorikeets, here are the musk lorikeets we saw. And as you can see, that's the only time we've seen the musk lorikeets. So whereas here, the rainbow lorikeets, you can see, are there all through the time. They're moving around. It's just that we have a big influx when there's a big flowering. The musk lorikeets, according to what we've seen, only occurred at the mass flowering of the swamp mahoganies. So the question there is, where are the musk lorikeets on the second Tuesday of the month for the rest of the year? So you can see that these figures, you start to think, okay, why are the birds there? What are they, and why are they not there? Okay, we get fig birds. Now the fig birds look similar sort of pattern. See, there's an increase here associated with the May-June flowering of the swamp mahoganies here, but we also get spring flowering events with the fig bird. So you've got a spring flowering event there, and you can see there's a spring flowering event here. So obviously the fig birds like the swamp mahoganies, but they're also feeding on other birds, flower sources as well. So I'm not sure what they would be. In some ways, doing this work starts to ask these questions. What other sources of food are there around for these other birds? So it might be that spring flowering things have a lot of bottle brushes in them, because there are so many bottle brushes planted around our streets. If we come down to the noisy miners, you can see that there is no increase in abundance during the swamp mahogany mass flowering, but we did see the Indian miners in there. But the story here, I think, is that the noisy miners are essentially resident, and so we have a relatively unchanging population through the area we walk in. And so even though there's a lot more food, you've actually still got the same number of birds, and they're territorial, so you don't get a big increase. Whereas the fig birds and the lorikeets are presumably coming from a bigger area into our site when there's good conditions there. So we've got two different sorts of bird populations, the local ones that stay like that and more or less stable, and ones that are on a bigger scale, and they're moving in and out depending on conditions like what's flowering. Okay, the red wattlebird, it's a seasonal one. You can see here it's August to January there. There's another season here and another season here. So it's coming in seasonally. Perhaps it's really responding to other plants other than swamp mahoganies. Of course, in spring we have a lot of flowers in gardens and so on. So there may be a whole lot of garden flowers involved in that one. And the olive-backed oriole is similar. The olive-backed oriole perhaps shows another pattern, and that is, you remember I talked about the drought back here, and then we go into 2 good seasons. You can see that we have fewer records. We're only down to 1 and 2 sightings back in the drought period, and you can see numbers perhaps building up. So we may have a response there as the conditions for feeding and so on are improving there. Coeels, now I understand they're migrants, and these ones, it's very, only got small numbers of these. Again, it's interesting. When I was a bit skeptical at the beginning of the project about counting the birds and how reliable this would be, but I've been impressed. You can see we have something like 1 and 2 here, and then 2, 3 here, and then 2. It's very reliable recording. But you can see that the coeel is concentrated in exactly the same series few months. That's from October to January, pretty well each time. So it's obviously moving in response to temperature, I suppose, rather than things being flowering. I've tossed this one in, the leaden flycatcher, because we occasionally get rare birds. And as you can see, there was one recording and another recording at the other site. So, okay, what does this mean? Well, this could be a rare visitor, or it could be a rare visiting expert in the group who can only record, who noted those either orally or visually. And so our data does sometimes have the influence of extra expertise, which pick up things that the others don't. But generally, the data, to me, I find it impressive. Okay, one more. This is a different one. This is a water bird, the white-faced heron. And you can see with this one, we have our most records. We mentioned this the other day. We talked about white-faced herons, and someone said, are there 2 or 3? And I said, oh, my graphs only show that there are 2 or 3. There's only ever a few of them. And indeed, that was the case. But you can see the records back in the drought period, each time, at least one. And then over here, numbers drop. And I'm interpreting this as the herons are on the river, on the Cooks River, during drought periods, because it's a reliable source of water and food. And come the rains, they then move far and wide. So we're actually acting as a refuge for birds during droughts that then can spread out more. So there's a whole lot of implications for our management of our wild areas, you know, plantings and these sort of things along the river in relation to the birds that we can get out of some of this data. And I hope I've only done about, well, half a dozen species there. As I said, there's 60 altogether, but there's limited data on a lot of them. But I sort of thought the other day, okay, we should continue it on for 5 years. We should say, okay, we've done 3, we continue on for 5 years, and at that end of that time, we can probably put the data together in some sort of form and sort of say, okay, here's some graphs, here's the information of birds of the Cooks River, 2019, 2024, and sort of put that on a website somewhere, so that we've actually tracked what happens in that period as far as we can go. Okay.
Just one comment. One thing we've noticed at Rosedale is that a lot of the wading birds correlate with the actual tides.
Yes, look, I
tried
that. I went back and I put all of the tides in. I found there was a website that gives you the Canterbury height, and I worked out exactly the tide at 7 o'clock in the morning. You can do that, but I couldn't relate that to the numbers of birds, because there are a couple of
more the waders. We've noticed, I think, that when the wading birds, especially the spoonbills and some of the egrets and stuff, when the river's low, we'll see them, and I'll be in the mud flats and doing their thing.
We have quite steep banks too at our end. It's more of a drainy kind of thing. So there's actually no purchase for them at all, except in the mangroves.
Yeah.
When the river's high. So we try to choose our week to have a low tide, because we get many more birds.
Yes, that would be important.
It's not always.
I mean, after you've done 5 years' work, and you target particular ones, it takes a long time to go through them all and graph them out.
But I had thought of that, because I've heard discussions about, high tide, we won't see many birds, you know, wading, you know, and then we have to see the birds in Cup and Saucer Creek, something like that, wherever they go there. And it's interesting, after rain, we often see some of those wading birds on the banks. Okay.
Yeah, because we include Cup and Saucer wetlands in our setup, that confuses the data a bit, because you can't say the water birds are all there because of tide, because that's not the problem. So
ask if you had an upper limit where you stopped counting, because we did, and now I'm thinking that's going to skew your data from us, because for most of the time we've been doing it, we've stopped at 10, just gone 10 plus, and this I've started doing the eBird stuff, increased that to 20, but when you've got, hundreds of lorikeets and whatever, we just go 20 plus, and
Yeah.
so
Well,
our
we-
total,
no,
we're not so interested in the total number of birds as the
It's a range of species. Well, we are interested in the range of species, but we're lucky we've got some very good counters.
All right.
No, I think that, no, not the total number of birds, but the individual species, the number of birds is important. Our measures of, well, you saw the measures of the noisy miners like that, but essentially you can see that they're more or less
We might
stable. If we just put down 20 plus, I think we'd have lost something. I think it's worth saying, okay, there was a flock the other day, there was a flock of starlings and someone put down 83 or something. Okay, we could have put down 8. Right, that's
There's
right.
only 3 of us.
Because there seems to be a repeatability amongst the recorders, that they know what a flock of 80 is like, and therefore they put it 80 and then they sort of think somehow, oh, this is smaller than last time, now we're at 60. I think that probably is a bit better than just stopping at anything, because after all, if you wanted, you can go back to the data and you could just
I put in plus, I put it in the notes.
Yeah.
So
You can get around.
Yeah, but I think
It has surprised me how good these people are.
Yeah.
When I look at something and you find, it's like the, I suppose the white-faced heron is easy, you have 2 or 1 or 2, but
It's only a handful
some of the other things are pretty good.
Yeah.
Probably what we're missing is a correlation of other things, like we could talk about the robusta, but we didn't record flowering of mangroves or something. I don't know whether that's important.
Acacias particularly. A couple of
Which one?
Our acacia currants gets all our birds.
Okay, yeah, right. So we haven't
Oh,
got
that's
this.
fantastic for the 20 years.
Yeah.
Chris was trying to say something.
I was just going to say, a couple of the observers regularly do shorebird counts. And I started there with the very fine-tuned eyes that can do groups of 10, 20, 30, 40, a single scan. But you got to practice. And what we found over time, over the years, the group gets better and better at saying, oh, there's that starling clock has got to be somewhere around 60. Looked like long sort of 3 weeks ago. And then you start to be able to actually segment the groups and sort of break them up. And because of those disciplines that come from the shorebird counters, like David, I think you're
Not shorebirds, no.
yeah,
Yeah,
David.
and Chris might too. He's got a very good eye.
Yeah, so a little bit of practice goes a long way.
Hey, David. Yeah, well, this is just like photos, really. It's the collection from Cooks River, Walleye Creek, the Tempe areas and the Greenway. I could have added photos for 2 other areas. One was the Barton Park Landing Lights wetland, where you get a completely different range of birds. And also, in particular with that area, you don't get noisy miners very much at all. So that's why you get a flock of 50 red-browed finches sometimes. And the other area that I could have, that's sort of in the inner west, is Sydney Park, which gets quite unusual, it's quite special birds there, like Lewis rails and buff-banded rails, breeding in that park, and crakes sometimes as well. Unusual birds, quails, which you don't see in other places. And Sydney Park was completely, changed from industrial wasteland to a beautiful park. And even though there's thousands of very, very expensive dogs wandering around, looking like they own the place, they almost do, there's smart little fences about so high. They just keep the dogs out of the really thick bush. And in that really thick bush, you've got a lot of special birds. Anyway, I start off, that's one of our early morning sessions there. You can see the mist is still around, but we're still looking for birds. And they're the areas there, the Mudlarks through the Cooks River. There's the Tempe Birdos, which had their 10th anniversary just last Saturday. the Tempe Wetlands and Reserve. And Tempe Wetlands, it took me many years to find out where they were. They're sort of hidden away behind the car park there next to the streets at the back of Tempe Reserve. 3 ponds. It's worth wandering around those ponds. And there's the Greenway Birdos, the Inner West Environment Group, that do the surveys from Waratah Mills and along the Hawthorn Canal, two surveys a month. I thought I'd better start off with a magpie lark, otherwise known as a mudlark, otherwise known as a peewee, but just a common bird along the river, and breeding along the river too. And you've got to admire these birds when you look at that nest and think how many thousands of beakfuls of mud go to building a nest there. And they raise the chicks, feed the chicks and so on. Pelicans on the river there. The boat harbour's a good place to see pelicans, but anywhere up and down the river. And quite often when you see these magnificent birds, you see people walk along the river, stop, get their phones out and take a photo of it. So that's really nice. Great cormorants on the river too. And they're not only the biggest of the cormorants, but they're a good hunter, good at fishing. It's like an eel there, I think. But it's worth, if you see one of these birds on the river and it's diving all the time, just watch it for 10 minutes and see what it catches. It's quite amazing. And see what it could swallow too. A smaller cormorant with a lot more white is the pine cormorant. And there's the little pine too, which has got a little bit more white above its eye there. The little pine cormorant. They're common on the river there fishing. And the little black cormorants. The little black cormorants are more of a social bird, and they can be flocks of 30 or 50 of these. I counted 38, I think, in the boat harbour one time. Yes, yes. And they like to play with each other, squabbling after fish and things, all up and down the river. And their relative, the darter. All these cormorants and darters have to dry their wings. They don't have oil in their wings, so they have to dry them. So they often perch. And it's good to have perches. Sometimes when there's a casuarina that's blown down into the river, the birds will all perch on that to dry their wings. So these fallen trees might look untidy, but they're valued by the birds. And this one here, which is in its native habitat there rather than next to a garbage bin, the ibis, was called the sacred ibis, but now the Australian variety is called the Australian white ibis. It's relative. You sometimes see them associate together, the spoonbill. Sometimes you see 2 of these on the river. Great egrets. There's other egrets as well. I don't see as many as I used to of the egrets on the river. White-faced herons. These are a fairly common heron. I think for every 100 herons you see, 90 of them would be white-faced herons and 8 would be the striated heron, this one here, which is also known as the mangrove heron because that's often where it lurks and it breeds in the mangroves. It builds a big nest, often in the mangroves. There's one nest now with a chick in it down there, the sluice, the sewer pipe way down there in Goffertland Park. And lurking, this is in the Dibble Street wetlands, is the Nankeen night heron. That's the rare visitor, maybe 2 out of every 100 herons would be these ones. They're putting quite a few around, but they probably hunt at night and they're just sort of roost, keep out of sight during the day. And if they see us, sometimes they'll fly away very quick. All the duck type birds, the teals, heavy black ducks, the wood ducks there with the ibis behind, often in pairs. The swamp hen, I think an Australasian swamp hen there with the chicks. This is a Cup and Saucer Creek wetland. The dusky moorhens there, and there's also Eurasian coots, which I haven't found any photos on the surveys actually. So, but they're a common bird in the wetlands and along the river too. Black-faced cuckoo shrikes, you see these quite often. The rainbow lorikeets, very abundant, and rarer the musk lorikeet. Eastern rosellas. Galahs, there's a few, not a big number of galahs, but there's sometimes they lurk with the corellas, which are in big numbers, or they're just pairs of them. They like the grass seeds. The little corellas, lots of these corellas, and they're a fun sort of bird. And the self-crested cockatoos. So often you get big flocks of those and the little corellas, like 30, 100 maybe. all the way up and down the river, particularly the golf courses. And just go back there, whoops, back that one. The importance of hollows, they fight after these hollows. There's
Yes.
very few trees with good hollows for nesting. There's nest boxes in trees, but the hollows are particularly valuable for these birds of the lorikeets and other birds. The red wattle bird, okay, we can see the red wattles, which is not named after the wattle tree, it's named after those things hanging down off the tree. Tasmania has a yellow wattle bird. And the big birds there, the male and the female, quite different. The olive-backed oriole herd, 20 females, quite a few breeding pairs along the river, if you know where to look. The raven, we don't have crows here, we have ravens, but there are some other blackbirds, like the common blackbird. Pacific towel, that's the male, with red eye, and that's probably a juvenile or a female, similar. And the noisy miners, which are a flocking bird, so you often get the big assemblage of these. Superb fairy wrens. At the Ford Street site, when you see the superb fairy wren come out, they're really careful to avoid the noisy miners, because the noisy miners will come down and attack them. Golden Whistler, that was one of the ones set on the survey near the Ford Street site of the trees there, the eucalypt trees. The leaden flycatcher there somewhere too, the survey.
That's beautiful photo.
And the welcome swallows, these were around, these nest under the bridges, I think. And you get fairy martins as well. There's probably that one you've seen before, I think, of them feeding down there the golf course. The grey butcherbird, quite a few pairs of these breed along the river. The masked lapwings we see as well. These are a funny bird. They don't build a nest, they just sort of plonk their eggs down anywhere and then defend that area by attacking anything that comes close. And then do the same when the chicks hatch. And our native pigeons, the crested pigeons, these are a bird that's come back into the city really, and they're doing quite well. You see a lot of these in the parks and places now. Magpies, these breed along the river as well. Woolly wagtails breed along the river. Sometimes if you see a woolly wagtail attacking dogs that have walked on the river, even if they're leashed up on a leash, that means there's a nest nearby. Look around in the casuarinas, not that high, usually about head high or maybe a bit higher. Look around for a little cup type nest. Now some of the birds of Tempe, around the Tempe area, quite different in many ways. Grebes sometimes breed there, not every season. I think in the last 10 years I've seen them breed 2 or 3 times. But when they do breed, they have a floating island type nest, and the chicks are quite amazing to see. And they often hide on the parent's back. Hardhead ducks, which we don't get upstream, we get these regularly at the Tempe wetlands. Reed warblers there too, except we haven't seen them in recent years until last Saturday. We saw them back again, and we saw a few of them there in the ponds, reed warblers. They're quite common at Sydney Park and also around the Barton Park landing rights area. Silverise, a lot of silverise there. Nankeen night herons sometimes roost there, sometimes they're a temporary visitor, and they seem to be attacked by the other birds sometimes. We've had buff-banded rails there a few times in the reserve and in the wetlands there. Rufous fantail, and a very occasional visitor there. Whereas the grey fantail is a lot more common. Red-rump parrots are quite common in the Tempe reserves there. Haven't seen too many lately, but they've been ripping up a lot of the grass there for rework of the sporting field. So these are also known as grass parrots. They just often sit in the grass and they're very well camouflaged. Honey eaters there too. So we get quite a few honey eaters at the wetlands, but they've been very quiet lately. We haven't seen many in the last few months. It's been dead for honey eaters, probably because it's a lot better in other places. So yellow-faced honey eaters, white-plumed honey eaters, New Holland honey eaters, the most common one there. Sometimes white-naped honey eaters, spinebills. I should add that the noisy miner is a honey eater. spotted paralites
That's
there,
beautiful.
and they breed in the Tempe area.
Are they more common there because?
I haven't seen them there lately, but
No.
I've heard them. But they breed along Walleye Creek too, near Torella. But they used to breed in the where the path goes along. There's all these rocks on the side, boulder type rocks there, which are good because they're good habitat for lizards, hiding in the holes between the rocks. And these go to those holes and make their nests there too. They normally build an underground, like a metre long hole, and have the nest at the end of that, which they just a lot of work to dig it out, and then they line it, and then they one of them must sit there on the nest of the eggs, and then they fly in and out. So it's nice to see them. And when you see them, if you see one never just fly into the ground somewhere into a hole, it's worth just sitting there very quietly and just watching, because often they return every 5 minutes or so bringing food in. So they always land a few metres away from the nest hole, look around, when it's safe, into the nest. Red-barred finches, quite a few there, less lately, but golden whistlers, an occasional visitor. Channel-billed cuckoos, we get these all over the place, channel-billed cuckoos along the Cooks River, and you hear a dreadful kerfuffle. These lay their eggs in Currawong nests usually. Fantail cuckoos there. They're a beautiful bird, a fantail cuckoo. They've got a very, very distinctive call, a trill-type call. And once you know that call, it's not too hard to spot where it is. Black-faced monarch. It's the only one I've ever seen there at the Tempe. It's a rare bird, but I have seen them on Walleye Creek. Beautiful birds. Yellow-tailed black cockatoos that come along at certain times, fly past, and along Walleye Creek as well. Sacred kingfishers there. We see these on the Tempe Reserve, sometimes in the wetlands as well. I thought it's sort of seasonal. They come to the mangroves during our winter, but I've got photographed them there most months of the year in different places, not in large numbers, but they were in large numbers on the lower Cooks River around the Gough Whitlam Park, Walleye Creek area, Kale Park, and sometimes you can see three in the one view. One, two, three sacred kingfishers, all diving and eating mud crabs. Their principal diet in winter, I think. And they nest, probably not around here because they nest usually in termite nests. In a tree, they drill a hole in that, or in a tree hollow as well, small tree hollow. You get the raptors around there too. There was a brown goshawk that lived down in that area there. They're the Gulf firing range. It's probably gone now because its habitat's gone because of the Gateway project there, building a new road. This is a new recent arrival on the river, the osprey, and quite a few people have seen it now. It lives down there, the Cromwell Golf Course, very close to the airport. Probably close to the airport there so it doesn't get attacked by the other birds. They're not popular, even though they only live on fish. But this was diving into the river pretty close to where those boats are there, the Princess Highway, at near Tempe Reserve. So we've seen the osprey now on the surveys. Swamp harrier, I saw this on a survey day when I went back to the wetlands to have a look after the survey that flew across. And that would hunt little birds, I think. Caspian terns, we've seen these up the river, up past the Lang Street Bridge. They sometimes, just one by itself, flies up the river, turns around and flies back, looking for little fish to hunt, maybe to do with the mullet. Now, move over to Walleye Creek, some of the unusual birds, white-headed pigeons. One of these was seen a few years ago in Newtown, which has been unusual in the King Street. So, eastern yellow robins. We don't get robins in other places, but they are often along Walleye Creek in that upper bit. Spangled drongos, there was a whole family of them there last year. This unusual black bird with a very distinctive tail, the drongo. And the variegated fairy wrens. You don't get these all the time. I've only seen them there 2 or 3 times, and you just know their call, a bit different to the normal fairy wren call, but a beautiful little fairy wren. You get little flocks of these, and they can be upstream or downstream near Torella. And goshawks breed in the valley too. It's a juvenile and an adult there, I think. That was during the lockdown the year before last, 2020. Black-shouldered kite, and a sea eagle. This was up near Bexley North, the sea eagle with a fish. being pursued by ravens. White-brown scrubwrens, which we also get on the Greenway. And one exotic bird here, the red-whiskered bulbul, is pretty common there. And it's a pretty inoffensive bird for an exotic. It doesn't seem to scare away the other birds. And next, the Greenway. So quickly through here, superb fairy wrens. We often get these at Taverners Hill Light Rail Station. You wouldn't think Taverners Hill Light Rail Station, but that's where the Hawthorn Canal survey starts at 7:30 in the morning. And it's surprising up there how many birds we see, because it's a bit higher. We see higher in the trees, and see the fairy wrens.
They're also at Lewisham West Railway too.
Yes.
Like
yeah, we'll
in the wasteland. You've got a bit of lantana and
yes.
a bit of mist, but they thrive.
Yeah, they do well. And you can see here, in the Greenway, it's not such a bushy environment, so the birds have to make do with what they can to perch on. The spotted pardalotes there as well. That's at Taverners Hill. And New Holland honeyeaters around there. You often see these. And and other parts of the Greenway too. We get them quite often. And down there, the Muir Reserve. Quite common there, really. We did record the white-plumed honeyeater there last survey. Yellow-faced honeyeaters are reasonably common there. White-brown scrubwren, not common at all, but we were overjoyed. We saw one along the Greenway below the station level there. Tawny frog-grouse. There was a pair near the Waratah Mills Light Rail Station where we start, but they these birds move around a bit. So one of them there, I think. We've seen them in other places on the Greenway too. There's the golden whistler there, the female. It's a good, it shows you that if you're sitting on a nest, it's good not to be seen when you compare it with that really bright yellow male. And big bird, and lots of big birds. So you get big numbers of these, big numbers sometimes. The throated herons, and I'm sure these breed along the river there because there's a juvenile that's turned up just recently, we saw last survey. We've had our leaden flycatcher moment too. This is the one at on the upper Greenway and Waratah Mills. Top-knot pigeons, unusual thing. This is where David Hare notices them fly over, and you'll look up, 12 top-knot pigeons flying across, but sometimes they come in low with unusual pigeon. Very unusual bird. The coel there, we often see these, and these are brought up by red wattlebirds, and the red wattlebird parents have to work frantically getting food. So this very demanding, very loud chick with an insatiable appetite.
So it's true that parents hang around for them?
Oh yes, they do. Well, they come back anyway, and they call, and eventually they take it away. So chestnut teals breed along the Hawthorn Canal. The Hawthorn Canal is pretty poor-looking water quality, but these
It's terrible.
They-
It's worse than
they do breed there. So rainbow lorikeets and even a king parrot. These are occasionally. But a friend that lives on the Hawthorn Canal recently near it said they saw a king parrot yesterday with special text. And white-faced herons, these are chicks in a nest. And this is just above the cycleway on that path there.
Whereabouts
Hawthorn Canal.
along the canal?
Yeah, they don't like it, or whatever it is, the suburb there, 5 o'clock or something. I don't know what that suburb is, but yeah, on the Hawthorn Canal. This is right above where hundreds of people walk each day. Just in that nest, and very quiet. David Hare found her, spotted them and told us about it. But white-faced herons, beautiful, and then when they're a bit bigger, great. They're still around there. They're hunting for food there. Silver eyes, and as I said, they make do whatever structures they can to perch on, the red wattlebirds, and they live on. These trees that are planted in the streets are very important food sources for them. And as they make do whatever structure. But I think birds have got a good sense of smell now. They're sort of the grey butcherbird and bush turkeys. I have seen one in Walleye Creek.
There's supposed to be 4 endangered.
Okay.
So one on the golf course.
Okay. Yeah, they can fly very well, and I've been, you know, in Lane Cove National Park
Oh,
looking for
yes.
powerful owls, and I look, oh, it's a powerful owl. No, it's a bush turkey perched up in the. They just sit up, you know, a long way up in the tree. They're a big bird. Yeah.
But on
And-
Facebook, there are 4 seen the Warritar Mills. And
Okay.
they're worried they're going
Oh,
to
yes.
actually,
Yeah, once they build their mound, you can't get rid of them. We get with the raptors as well. This is what a survey we saw, Nanking Kestrel and the brown goshawk. And just to finish off with a couple of the exotic birds, I think, that we get there, which we don't get in other places
we
around
get
the
them
area.
at
The
the
sparrows.
water pumping station in Western Street.
Yeah,
There's one.
yeah, sparrows. Whoops, oh, something's slowed down. Oh. And I'll just click on that blue. Have I returned? Maybe. Whoops. Oh, well, the last one there's just a common minor. So yeah, there we are.
There we go.
So I just finished off with the common minor now, and it's different to the native noisy minor. But they have similar habits, I think. Similar, they look a bit similar. This one's the brown one. Okay, thank you.
I'd like to personally thank David because he regularly turns up to every Mudlark event. He then supplies the photos for our reports, and he did this compilation of photos at extremely short notice. And I think enough.
Very much. That was absolutely fantastic. Peter, Jack, Logan, and David. I was just going to ask a quick question. I know we're sort of running short of time, but do any of you know what happens with? I've never seen an immature peregrine.